Hi, I'm Diane Largeman, and I'm here today with Victoria Roberts, who we think we met probably 30 plus years ago. And we've had a couple of martinis, but I have to say I think this is probably one of the hardest interviews I've done, because we've been sitting here talking about Victoria and her family and her friends and acquaintances and life in San Miguel. And there's just so much to cover, but we're going to try to give you a condensed version. And with that, I'd like to introduce Victoria and find out a little bit about her family and how she was brought up in San Miguel.
So my mother and grandmother were from Argentina, and my grandmother was Welsh, of the Welsh who emigrated to Patagonia, to Comodoro Rivadavia, and my grandmother married Adolfo Roth, who was my mother's father, and he was from a Hungarian family that had immigrated to Buenos Aires. And my grandmother always wanted to travel, and she had sent my mom up to New York. And it's a long story, but eventually I was born. And in about 1961, my mother and grandmother were living in New York City. My grandmother was working for Selecciones of the Reader's Digest. And they transferred her to Mexico City in 1961. And my mother followed with me. And my mother married a New Yorker in Mexico City, Bob Benjamin. And we lived in Mexico City until 1970. But when I was little, I used to come here because my stepfather, Bob, was friends with Leonard and Reva Brooks.
Oh.
Very good friends with them. So we used to come to San Miguel when I was little, and it was a long, long trip. And then when my parents divorced in 1968, Mom and I came to live here for a year, which was really fun because I got to ride before school. We lived across the street from Augusta Irving's school.
Was that on Zacateras?
On Zacateros. They had an apartment. Augusta and Ramon Ramirez had a house and an apartment across the street that we rented. And so I would walk up a little lane to school. But before school, I would go up and ride. And I was allowed to come to school just a little bit later because I was riding.
Where did you ride then?
With Capitan Canales, when he was where Liverpool is now, across from where Atascadero had been on the other side. Yeah, so it was great. It was really wonderful.
A whole different world, no?
Yeah, it was fun. Also in those days, the Bellas Artes had, I think it was Leonard Brooks started this. It had violins, violas, and cellos that you could borrow. And I borrowed a violin and had free violin classes at the at Bellas Artes, which was great.
Now, what years were those, Victoria?
Now, that must have been 1968. It was before the Olympics, I think. And I was friends with Paquina Langenscheidt, and her parents had a ranch called La Quemada.
So Paquina is the wife of
Jaime.
Jaime
Yeah.
Fernandez, okay.
And so I spent a lot of time going to their ranch and staying on their ranch. But Augusta's school was extraordinary. She's a really great teacher and a great character as well.
Can you, in short, just tell that for the people who don't know where Augusta came from and who she married?
Augusta Irving was sort of a left-wing Jewish intellectual, I think, who'd lived in the village, and her family had actually settled in the south. She came to San Miguel, and she married Don Ramon Ramirez, who was a rancher. Ramon's ranch was where the presa is now. And I remember because before they flooded for the presa, we went to Don Ramon's ranch. But here he was this New Yorker, and she was very funny. She would translate, because my mother and I would go for drinks on a Saturday, and she would translate this conversation in English into Spanish, and she'd go, "Tú sabes, Ramoncito, ¿qué? Dice Inés." And of course, my mother thought that Ramoncito really understood everything. But he was a character. But it was quite a contrast to have this real New Yorker and a very Mexican rancher guy. So, and no, it was great. It was only for 1 year, and then eventually we went to Australia to live.
And you were there for how many years?
I was there from age 13 to 29.
And why did your mother, come back here? Why did you come back here?
My grandmother eventually retired from the Digest, and she decided to live in San Miguel. And she was one of the first people to buy a house in Los Frailes.
This house?
Yeah. When there was a pamphlet that said Club Náutico Los Frailes, like yacht club on the presa and all these things. They're ridiculous.
What year was that? Do you remember?
I don't know if it was the late 70s to early 80s, something like that. Because when is the devaluation? I don't remember. Because it was before the big one where it went from 12.50 to 25. So, so my grandmother was here, but we were in Australia. And she considered coming over there, but she didn't, which I'm glad she didn't. So I would come here on holidays. And
so did you go to school here? Were you educated here? Or
I went to school, I went to Augusta's, and then when I was little I went to the Liceo Franco Mexicano, which was all French, and then Mom took us out of there and put us in the American school.
In Mexico City? In
Mexico City, yeah. Okay. And then in Sydney, I went to North Sydney Girls High, and then I went to art school. So,
can you tell the people who don't know who you are, what you do, what you've done, and what you're still doing?
I'm a cartoonist for the New Yorker, and I've been under contract since about 1986. So how long? I'm not sure how long that is. Is it coming up for 40? It would be 40 years, 40. I think, in 2026, I think. So 30 odd years I've done the same thing. Every Tuesday I do 10 rough cartoons for the New Yorker and send them in and hope to sell a cartoon.
Do they give you the subject matter? Or
No, the cartoons are, well, no, sometimes if they have special issues, they'll say, "Oh, we have an issue about this or that," but that's rare. The cartoons are independent of copy. In fact, there's a checking department that would make sure that the cartoon had nothing to do with the article, that didn't reflect that. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the changes that? I don't know if we have enough time, but the changes that you've seen in San Miguel.
In San Miguel. Well, when I would come here before 1968, it was just all cobblestone, and we always stayed at the Posada San Francisco, which was right on the square, which has been closed for years and years and years. Occasionally we would go out to, the Motel Siesta, which was on the edge of town.
Was that where the trailer park was for?
No, that was down Campamento Coa, but this was really on the Salida Celaya. Wasn't far at all, but we thought, as kids, we hated it because we thought it was really far away.
Is that where City Market is now?
It was just further in.
Oh my God!
From that, yeah, and we thought it was like really far. So we like to stay in, and it was always a beautiful town. The market was wonderful, and And then when we were living here in 1968, we'd always go to the Cortijo, to the hot springs, and my mother would go to lunch at El Patio and dinner at La Bugambilia. La Bugambilia? No, it was El Patio, and the same owners had another one called, and there was where La Terraza had been, there was a kind of soda fountain place. And there were fritangas in the portales. They were fried foods in the portal. And as kids, we had a lot of because in Mexico City, you know, they were always kind of careful where were you going and stuff. In San Miguel, we just had free run. We just go wherever we wanted to.
So how old were you when you were here? And when
I was 11.
Okay.
11 and 12, I think. Yeah, it was wonderful. And there was a supermarket by the Sanchez sisters, the Sanchez, Las Sanchez, and one was, one of the sisters was very, very blonde, and we loved going there. And what else was there? There was La Bugambilia, the ice creams in the Portal, and you know, everyone knew. In terms of the foreign population, everybody knew everybody. And there was a wonderful art and bookstore run by
the sisters?
Jim Hawkins.
Oh. Okay.
Well, it was Jim Hawkins and Carmen Masip, but Jerry and Carmen ran it. They were a couple. They were wonderful.
Uh-huh.
And so that was there. And it was just, and I used to ride before school. That was the best thing.
Oh.
With Capitan Canales, Eugenio's dad.
Right.
And it was really nice. It was so good. And there was a new cinema, Aldama, I think it was called, with top-notch movies for a while.
It's still there.
It's still there, but I don't know what it is now.
They use it for the film festival, I think. That's about it. As far as I know, I don't know.
And then on San Francisco, used to take the Nescafe jars and go to a place and get fresh cream. And then they'd come to the door with baskets of strawberries, you know, they're short, and asparagus, of course, or broccoli, but you'd get the fresh strawberries to the door, and you'd have this cream. It was pretty amazing. But there wasn't, I'm not sure if we didn't have a telephone. My grandmother didn't have a telephone for 10 years here in Los Frailes. And there was a booth that you could go to and order a call, and then they'd say, "Ya está su llamada," and you'd go into this booth and get the long distance call. I forget what street it was in.
When your grandmother bought this house or built this house, this was probably really out in the country, no?
Oh, it's really far out. I thought, why didn't you live in town? You know, why are you out there in Los Frailes?
Well, how did you get into town in those years?
My grandmother had a Volkswagen, so that's how. She didn't know how to drive. She had never driven in Mexico City. And when they changed the Digest offices, she was in Colonia Juarez, and they changed, she could walk to work. But then they moved them to Polanco, and she learned to drive, and quite late in life. And when we were living here in 1968, my grandmother came to visit, and she said to her sister Anne, "Don't worry," because she was driving in the Vocho, in the Volkswagen, "Jesus is with me." And her sister thought, well, what's going on, you know? But it was Jesus, who was the portero of her building, who was driving her to San Miguel. So
we always ask the same questions and sort of anticipate the answer, but how do you accept the changes? I mean, the world has changed, but
there are certain things I really like. I mean, the fact that internet exists is great, because my grandmother could only listen on a kind of short wave late at night to Sally Jesse Raphael coming out of Texas somewhere. So the communications are a lot better. I feel that I don't know if you're right downtown in San Miguel, physically it's the same, but lately, I think the last 3 months, there just a lot of businesses have opened and things that are, and they've put the big glass windows, and so the feel is very, very different.
More upscale, or whatever you want.
It's kind of upscale restaurants, and it's a bit maybe what happened to Venice, I think. I mean,
or
Venice,
Santa Fe.
I don't know Santa Fe, but like as in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of boutique-y, and I'll never forget I loved Casa Cohen, which was a hardware store, and they also had all these brass things, and it was run by the Cohen family, and my mom was a friend of David Cohen's, and I love going in there, but to see that now it's like a hotel. And
can you tell us a little bit? I mean, you could go on and on and on, but the story of how the Cohens, the family, where they came from.
I'm not completely sure, and I should check, but I think they were from Turkey, and I think this needs to be fact checked.
Okay.
But
we'll speak to our
we'll speak to somebody who knows. I forget what, but the girls had arranged marriages, and they were quite religious, quite strict. But I don't know that David was that strict. He was a good friend of Mom's.
Didn't they come here after the war, right after the war? I thought in the late 40s or 50s?
I'm not sure, because they wouldn't have been in Europe. They would have been in, why do I think it's Constantinople or something? I'm not sure.
We'll have to look it up.
I really have to check with people who know. But my friend Mort Gerberg came here, cartoonist from the New Yorker, years ago, and they took Mort to Mexico City to meet female members of the Cohen family, hoping that he would marry one of them. and I always say to Mort, you could be in San Miguel with a hardware store, instead of being a New Yorker cartoonist. But of course, that's gone now. I think it's still a wonderful place. Yes. Somehow. And I like it because I can lead quite an independent work life. But there are enough like really interesting people that you have a good social life as well. I miss the fact that in the old days, well, it was mostly my mom's friends, but you knew all these really interesting, like Carmen Masip and Masha Bello and Augusta, who was the head of my school, who was just fascinating. She was wonderful. And the people seemed to be, I always think, like concentrated orange juice. They were very strong characters. I think of us as the younger people that are here now, and I've even asked, I used to ask Paulina and Paquina what, and I don't think we are as strong as the people who were here before us. And I guess because they had, I don't know, mostly come here as artists, and it was quite a rebellious thing to be here. Mm-hmm. But it was easy to know everyone. You knew everyone, and that was kind of fun.
This has been terrific.
I'm glad.
Hopefully we'll get to speak to you again. I know we're going to do a program at the Instituto, with a few of your friends who were brought up here. So, but we could go on and on. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Diane. And good luck with the project. It's wonderful. To the viewers, don't forget to like the video if you liked it, which I'm sure you did. And please subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined. Thank you very much.